For the last section of this video, I thought I'd talk about some of my favourite first-time watches and rediscoveries for sci-fi and horror. I would say that the bulk of my sci-fi viewing was actually courtesy of working my way through all 88 episodes and the subsequent mini-series of Farscape about midway through the year. I had vague memories of seeing episodes of it on and off some 25 years ago on BBC when it first aired, and had been curious for a while to give it a proper watch, especially given its cult status now as one of the better sci-fi shows of its time. I really enjoyed working my way through all of it. The characters, the world building, the Jim Henson creature puppets, and the extremely out-there scenarios the series often took with its episodes were all ingredients that kept me hooked. It didn't hit all the time. In fact, some of its episodes were complete duds, but even some of those duds still took big swings with their wacky ideas, and as such were admirable for trying. The sheer quantity of the other episodes that did work, though, more than made up for it. Charming, irreverent, goofy, engrossing, and at times really rather awe-inspiring. This was one of my 2025 viewing highlights for sure.
They should be scanning.
Move when you die.
Boy, was Spielberg ever wrong. Close Encounters my ass.
As for sci-fi films, I finally watched Ed Wood's disaster piece Plan 9 from Outer Space, a film that I've actually been meaning to see since I first heard about its legacy as a kid as supposedly the worst film of all time. It's nowhere near that bad. In fact, it's actually quite entertaining in its overly camp craftsmanship. Speaking of camp sci-fi, I watched a curious Gene Roddenberry penned film Planet Earth, which apparently started life as a pilot for a potential new sci-fi series. It started out kind of intriguing with its post-apocalyptic landscape, but then when the main plot started to happen, it just kind of felt like a rejected Star Trek episode. The most shocking thing about this 60s-looking sci-fi film, though, is the fact that it was actually made in the 1970s. The Omega Man was a much more entertaining 70s sci-fi film. I had no idea for the largest time that it was an adaptation of I Am Legend. Charlton Heston delivers a decent performance, and the opening act where he is seemingly the last person alive is fantastically shot. And lastly there was Dark Angel, or I Come in Peace as its alternative title goes. This one was a fun, wild ride about an alien that comes to Earth, steals a shit ton of heroin, shoots people up with it, and then steals their blood after saying to them, I come in peace. A good alien has also come to Earth and is on his trail, as well as two human cops, one of them a reckless renegade who does things his way, and the other a by-the-books FBI agent tasked to be his new partner and keep him in check after his old one got killed. So yeah, it's a mad 90s blend of sci-fi, horror, slasher, crime, thriller and buddy cop movie, and it's every bit as fun as it sounds.
I come in peace.
3 well-armed men have their throats cut before they can even draw their weapons. Who could possibly move that fast?
I also watched the entertainingly bad Supernova, which features the always engrossing James Spader, alongside Angela Bassett, both wondering why they signed up for this. Speaking of Angela Bassett, I had a blast revisiting all 4 Critters films, particularly the 4th one, which features her, Leo from Twin Peaks, and Chucky himself, Brad Dourif. They ain't masterpieces, but they always take me back to my youth, staying up late on a Friday night to catch whatever B-movie the BBC would stick on its graveyard shift. I also watched another film that I had not seen since I was about 10, and that film was the 90s cult sci-fi horror gem Ghost in the Machine, which features another antagonistic Twin Peaks character in a leading role as the good guy. The plot for this film is absolutely ludicrous. It concerns a serial killer whose consciousness gets uploaded to a rudimentary version of the internet following a power outage caused by a storm whilst he's in an MRI machine. It has a gloriously charming early 90s understanding of the internet, computer hacking and virtual reality, plus some ridiculously entertaining and convoluted deaths.
Something's there. Listen. Someone's watching us.
Amongst my favourite rewatches were 2 of Ben Wheatley's horror-adjacent works, In the Earth and A Field in England. In the Earth didn't gel with me first time round, as it had a bit of a different tone to what I was expecting from it, and I was watching it in a very sleep-deprived state. I'm pleased to say that I liked it a whole lot more this time around though. It's a film jam-packed with some really interesting and thought-provoking ideas that play on folky horror notions through perspectives of science and art. There's a naturalism to the acting that works really well and helps make the creepy stuff hit effectively with a surprisingly effective dosage of humour at the right moments. The sound design is also incredible, so too are the fun moments of trippy imagery.
I think I have worked out what God is punishing us for. Everything.
A Field in England is an easy contender for my favourite film of the 2010s. All my previous sentiments for In the Earth ring even truer here. It's a visually sublime film with some original and inventive lens work. It's daring and playful with its almost fourth wall breaking creative choices. It's chock full of majestic sound design and brilliant uses of music. Wonderful acting too from a tight-knit cast that brings Amy Jump's mesmerising, haunting, strange and often hilarious script to life. It's ensemble filmmaking at its most creatively rich. Jacob's Ladder was another one that I was glad to finally revisit. My first time watching this in over a decade. It's a film that stuck with me after catching it on TV as a kid. Of all the 90s and noughties Am I Going Insane movies, Jacob's Ladder always felt like the most compelling to me. It has a solid performance from Tim Robbins, some genuinely creepy sequences of Grand Guignol nightmare fuel imagery, a slow but steady pace, and clever editing that leads the story to a sombre and really affecting final scene. Some of its unsettling imagery has been cited as a major influence on the design choices of the Silent Hill games, another fine reason to love this film.
Get me out of here.
There is no out of here.
Where are you, Jake?
For some reason I decided to try watching the colorized version of George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. I can say with utmost certainty that this is an awful way to watch the film, as it killed so much of the atmosphere and tension, but it did get me thinking that a black and white version of Dawn of the Dead would probably actually work rather well. Maybe something I'll try in the not too distant future. As for first time watchers, I decided to follow that viewing of Romero's first zombie film up with his final one, Survival of the Dead, a film that I just simply never got around to watching back in the day. I was fully expecting to hate it based upon all the negative reviews, but it actually wasn't too bad. Still a far cry from the original trilogy though.
All we were looking for was a place where there was no them.
I watched Frank Henlotter's Brain Damage, which was weird as hell. Like some of his other films, there is a lot of interesting subtext about gender and sexuality that can be read into its themes. The suave, talking, polite parasite is one of the film's highlights for sure, but on the whole I think it wasn't quite as successful as Basket Case or Frankenhooker.
You can't keep killing people every time you're hungry!
I finally cracked open my All the Haunts BR's Volume 2 box set and decided upon two curious sounding 80s flicks, the first being The Enchanted from 1984. Whilst the film overall felt a little underdone and didn't really deliver much of a satisfying payoff to any of its mysteries, I found that the atmosphere and visual style partly made up for those shortcomings. I quite enjoyed the weird synth soundtrack and random cutaways to spying animals in the woods too. My second selection from the box set was the film that intrigued me the most actually upon reading through them. A somewhat unheard of 80s Welsh folk horror film about an ancient stone head that seemingly summons a demon in the dead of night to whomever currently it is in possession of. It was certainly a little on the cheesy side, and not the most original folk horror film I've seen, but I admired its attempts to build a creepy, ominous atmosphere with very little budget. I also appreciated the lovely shots of the Welsh valleys and countryside. At 46 minutes, it hardly outstayed its welcome either. The Haunting of Julia was another one I watched in October. The one British flip-side film that I didn't pick up on initial release due to not having a 4K player at the time and it being too pricey, and my assuming that it would get a standalone Blu-ray release down the line. Mia Farrow delivers a subtle but brilliant performance as a grieving mother in a ghostly tale of mystery, murder and the occult that felt like an art house blend of Don't Look Now and The Omen. The cinematography has an ethereal quality to it at times that really milks a dreamy feeling out of its London locations. The final shot of this film in particular is pure gothic cinema art.
I think we were lucky.
Why?
Whatever he saw was probably watching us.
Well, how could they survive without food?
Because I should imagine that as each one died, the others ate him.
Deathline was another curious 70s British horror flick that I watched. I've been meaning to see it for a while, as I was a fan of Creep when it came out in the noughties, and was curious to see how this 1972 work also tackled the very British but seldom used setting of the London Underground for a horror film. It was much slower than I was expecting, and perhaps didn't milk the most out of its premise and locale, but it did have a couple great scenes with a grisly atmosphere at times, with some real nice long takes slowly revealing the mutilated and half-eaten corpses of our fellow tube-dwelling cannibals' victims. There are scenes that reveal the cannibal and his pregnant companion that have a pretty melancholic vibe to them, which play with the viewer's sympathies, especially given that the flip side to those films' sympathies is a sexist, alcoholic, smarmy police chief, played fantastically and very charismatically by Donald Pleasance. You may not necessarily be rooting for him, but he absolutely steals the show with every scene he's in. It's not an entirely successful horror flick, but it certainly did some things that I hadn't seen in a British horror film before its time. I'm sure Pete Walker was taking a few notes for his cannibal cult classic Frightmare, and there were a few moments here that even prefigure Tobe Hooper's original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I remember I was fascinated by how the inside of the body looked. She always hoped I would be a surgeon one day.
And for my final horror film, and indeed my final film of the year, I went for something dark and unsettling that I'd been meaning to watch since I first heard about it when it was released nearly 10 years ago, The Eyes of My Mother. The film is a tonally exquisite mood piece of Southern Gothic horror that uses its beautiful stark black and white cinematography and somber pacing to unravel its disturbing layers rather slowly. The film centres on a young girl who grows up in a totally isolated farmhouse with just her parents. Her mother passes on her knowledge of eye surgery through the use of dead animals, and after a traumatic event changes their lives forever in the first act, the film moves forward to show the girl's journey through adolescence and womanhood, and we witness how her isolated life has shaped her as the film starts to get darker, delving into some increasingly disturbing territory that constantly causes you to reevaluate where your sympathies lie. It's a pretty tough watch for sure, and I'm not sure quite how I felt about the way the narrative progressed as a whole, but the atmosphere, the pacing, the filmmaking craft and performances all combined to deliver a truly hypnotic and moody piece of modern horror cinema, which I certainly admired a lot.